Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another spiritually uplifting episode of Anoor the Light. I'm your host, Jawad Peterson, and today we've got quite an interesting lineup for you. Cape Town recently played host to the second annual Waqf convention held at the Civic Centre. Waqf is described as being the plural of Waqf, which makes reference to the Islamic principle that encourages the contribution of land or property to a charitable organisation that can be used in perpetuity as either a place of learning or as a benefit to the community. There are many issues facing South Africa at the moment, and the goal of this convention was to see how Muslims can help address the inequalities caused by apartheid. The guest speaker was Finance Minister Trevor Manuel, and he gave government's input. For those of you who weren't at the function, let's take a look at what went on there.
Cape Town was the home of the second Waqf South Africa conference recently, and judging from the keynote speakers to the people present, it proved once again to be a resounding success. The idea behind Waqf SA comes from one of the core and fundamental teachings of Islam, and it's been practiced since the early days of the religion.
A Waqf, it's a voluntary charitable endowment that is bequeathed or bequested to Almighty Allah for charitable, humanitarian and religious purposes. A Waqf is something that one actually gives out of one's own generosity. It's a pure voluntary deed, but importantly, a Waqf remains intact and capital, and that's the distinguishing factor about a Waqf, that once made a Waqf, it needs to be permanent. It's not a consumable item. It actually goes into buildings and apartments and investments and so forth. And the income streams from these Waqf or Waqf are then used for social development purposes, for funding poverty alleviation, for community development and various other kinds of community development projects.
Finance Minister Trevor Manuel, who spoke eloquently about the role Waqf can play in the South African economy and society, delivered the opening address.
I think in the first instance we must recognize that because so much investment looks for immediate returns, short-termism dominates so much of the economy, but because people's lives are not determined in the short term, it takes generations to drive change. You need people with conscience and determination to drive the change, and I think that it's in this context that Waqf and Waqf finds resonance. And you know, there are many places where you've had the same investment through Waqf funds for 2 decades now, and you can begin to see the changes in those kinds of areas. It's that level of commitment that I think we're looking for. If I look at a project like Aslam in KwaZulu-Natal, started as an orphanage, it grew into a primary school, there now is preschool, primary school, high school, training for disadvantaged young people. It's that kind of presence that makes change. If you're looking for change, I think it's long-termism, and I think the commitment that comes with that, which sees people put or give of themselves into this project is what makes a difference, both to the general economy, because we're getting better skilled people, we're getting a better infrastructure where people live, we're getting access to services, but I think through that we're also contributing significantly to economic growth.
Islam asks of Muslims to not only give of themselves, but of their wealth too, and the Waqf Foundation has set itself up to deliver on this task.
Waqf South Africa is an institution, a Waqf institution, and why somebody should actually rather give it to Waqf South Africa as a Waqf institution or make a donation via Waqf South Africa is because we need to institutionalize the Waqf system. We need to institutionalize so that the management of that particular fund can actually take place at a much professional level. There are trustees that are appointed to ensure that the Waqf fund remains intact. There's a custodian in charge of that particular fund. The fund is actually managed. So instead of actually spending it oneself, where it may not really make much of a difference, although it is encouraged as well. But if one does it collectively, then it actually helps. And, there's an ethic within Islam that if we do something in Jama'ah, it's better. For example, Laysa al-Islam illa bil Jama'ah. There is no Islam without Jama'ah and being together and so forth. And I think also by pooling our resources, we are able to predict our spending, we are able to plan our spending, we are able to look at targeted areas. I think through an institution, you are able to manage and assess projects much more carefully. You can relate to other institutions and organizations at a much higher level. You can basically create much more funding available for projects and so forth. So I think through an institution, it really helps to actually mobilize much more resources and also help to further this whole concept of the Waqf system. So therefore, we really need an institution such as Waqf South Africa to do this particular management and mobilization and promotion of the Waqf system.
The legacy of apartheid has left many scars, and trying to heal them is no easy task. Education is a key partner for the distribution of Waqf, and the South African government is taking note as well as opening its arms to these kinds of institutions.
Well, Waqf South Africa has an important role. If you look at Waqf itself in terms of its evolution in Islam, the second biggest recipient of benefits through the Waqf funds or endowment has been general education. So indeed, Waqf would have a particular role to play. In the context of South Africa itself, given our past of imperialism, colonialism and apartheid, you are certainly aware of the huge disparities that have occurred and the kind of redress and equity that we have to achieve. Now, we believe that there is a role that Waqf can play in terms of the provision of water and sanitation, in terms of the provision of quality infrastructure, as well as learner-to-teacher support material. So these are some examples of what Waqf could do in the context of South Africa and in the light of the fact that we are trying to achieve equality and are committed to human dignity. Well, as I know, the Muslim minority in South Africa, they've always been magnanimous and charitable. They've always contributed to the welfare of communities and not exclusively to the Muslim communities. Many of our poor children from all race groups have been funded through bursaries, etc., by Muslim organizations, and we do believe that they can continue to play that role. What is critical at this juncture is the fact that we now have a democratic government which is committed to partnerships in terms of eradicating poverty and improving the quality of the lives of our people. And you have an opportunity and an invitation to say, Waqf, we are here, we would like to hear what contribution you are able to make, and we could facilitate that in a way that is meaningful without creating a situation where there's duplication.
Muslims make up just over 1% of the South African population, but their contribution to the country is immeasurable. Through organizations such as Waqf SA, they are contributing positively to rebuilding the fabric of the South African society.